or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Erin, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 28th, 2026 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. First article is about streaming Glamour and Grit in Manhattan by Jason Bailey. Audrey Hepburn's mesmerizing turn as a Tiffany's loving Manhattan party girl is on Amazon Prime Video. But if your tastes lean to grittier New York fare, Gene Hackman shines in The French Connection and in Get Shorty, which moves the action to Hollywood. Breakfast at Tiffany's, 1961. Audrey Hepburn's part fragile, part slinky, totally mesmerizing performance as Holly Golightly, the Manhattan party girl who finds love in the least likely of places, is deservedly iconic, and the movie surrounding it isn't half bad either. Just have your fast forward button at the ready for racist antics of Mickey Rooney. The director, Blake Edwards, mines both the humor and desperation of the novella by Truman Capote, with Hepburn and George Peppard as her would-be beau, generate enough sparks to power their shared apartment building. Edwards' later hits, The Pink Panther and A Shot in the Dark, are also on Prime. Next film, Cyrano, 2022. Edmond Rostand's late 19th century play, Cyrano de Bergerac, has proved to be quite a durable text, which shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Few things translate as well as the feeling that the person you love could never feel the same. This adaptation by the director Joe Wright, Pride and Prejudice, first presented on stage by the New Group in 2019, changes the source of the title character's low self-image. Instead of an oversized nose, he is of undersized height. Peter Dinklage is marvelous in the starring role, finding the cockiness and bluster that Cyrano uses to compensate while showing the beating heart just under the hard surface. He also provides a pleasant baritone for the songs by members of the National, which are the film's other deviation from Rostand's original. They're a masterstroke, beautifully conveying the longing and regret of this tragic tale. For more romance, stream The Notebook, or For Weddings and a Funeral on Prime. Next movie, Bring It On, from 2000. This beloved hit from the director Peyton Reed has all the trappings of a typical teen comedy, but underneath the bright colors and energetic dance numbers is a sly and subtle commentary on race, class, and cultural appropriation. Kirsten Dunst is marvelous as Torrance, the head cheerleader who discovers that her award-winning squad in San Diego, the Toros, has been stealing its routines from a rival group. She meets her match in Isis, Gabrielle Union, who leads East Compton's Clovers. Next movie is The French Connection, 1971. Winner of the Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor, Gene Hackman, this tense, terrific action movie tells the true story of two New York Police Department detectives and their relentless pursuit of a very large shipment of heroin. But that plot is just the clothesline on which the director, William Friedkin, from The Exorcist, hangs a series of mercilessly suspenseful pieces, including an ingenious cat and mouse game on a subway platform and justifiably celebrated car and train pursuit through the streets of Brooklyn that art critic Roger Greenspun called the most brilliantly executed chase sequence I have ever seen. Last movie is Get Shorty from 1995. The crime novels of Elmore Leonard had eluded filmmakers for years until the director Barry Sonnenfeld from Men in Black and the screenwriter Scott Frank cracked the code here. In this clever Hollywood satire with an enlightened sense of fun, John Travolta shines as Chili Palmer, a smooth-talking Miami debt collector who finds his skills are particularly valuable in the movie business. Gene Hackman is uproariously funny as a sketchy producer who is first Palmer's target and then his partner. If you love crime comedies, stream The Matador on Prime. Article about television. Rooster. Nothing against Steve Carell, but I started watching this comedy for his co-star Danielle Deadwyler, who gave me chills in Station 11. In Rooster, she plays a wry poetry professor at a liberal arts college. Carell is a middle-aged, best-selling novelist who arrives on campus to teach a seminar at an off-kilter moment in his life. Article about art. The Dugout. As a Cradle Cubs fan, I had to stop by the Art Institute of Chicago to see The Dugout, a new Norman Rockwell acquisition that is the latest of several studies he painted for the Saturday Evening Post and has been reprinted and displayed in countless Midwestern basements since. You can't look at those cackling fans without laughing. Go Cubbies! For books, The Whistler. I adore Anne Patchett's work, the crystal clarity of her prose, the world she creates where complicated people usually do the right thing. Her new novel, Whistler, is classic Patchett, a beautiful exploration of family and love. Games. Rat-a-tat-cat. There aren't that many children's card games that are truly fun for adults. This is one of them. My daughter and I play endless rounds of Rat-a-tat-cat, a game that requires some skill, strategizing, and a little math, too. And in music, Illinois. Sufjan Stevens' concept album, Illinois, is more than 20 years old, and I still return to it all the time. I especially love listening to it this time of year, when its images of rivers and skyscrapers and prairies, it feels like a Midwestern summer. Next article. Steve O's health pursuit isn't a stunt. By Catherine Shattuck. He only acts as if he has a death wish. In fact, Steve-O of Jackass notoriety works hard to keep himself alive. My entire identity is so tied to adolescence, young and reckless, he said, talking about Jackass, Best and Last, a compilation of greatest hits and new stunts. Steve-O, or Stephen Glover, 52, is aiming to achieve his optimal level of health and watches out for his fans, promoting cancer screening. He has been sober for 18 years and lives on an animal sanctuary in Portland, Tennessee. On a video call, he talked about his routine and must-haves. Here are edited excerpts. 1. Helix folding bike. It's an actual full-size bike with 24-inch wheels, which folds down in the most masterful and impressive way into a case that you can travel with and check in with your luggage. The guy who designed this bicycle absolutely needs to be obnoxiously wealthy because this design is unbelievable. Number 2, my swim kit. I bike to a lot of YMCA swimming pools, and my swim kit is so important. The Magic 5 makes a pair of swimming goggles that water doesn't leak into. You scan your face with your iPhone, and they're custom made. Their center mounted snorkel completely changed everything because it used to be like swim, and turn my head to get air. Now I don't turn my head at all. I'm perfectly symmetrical and I'm breathing steadily. 3. Shokz waterproof open swim headphones. They have a built-in MP3 player because when submerged in water, no Bluetooth is going to work. So I'm just blasting through the pool, rocking out to my music. I'm so in love with swimming laps that I'm very, very close to having a 75-yard single-lane swimming lap pool constructed. 4. Travel yoga mat. Super, super crucial. A regular yoga mat eats up a lot of space in a carry-on, so I have a folding one because I've got to do yoga every day. 5. Jump rope and hacky sack. I love to mix my hacky sack and my jump rope into my yoga. It's so important to get your heart rate going really fast. Like Warren Buffett says, you want to make sure you break a sweat every single day. Number 6, perfect push-up handles. Strength training is so important, but I'm not going to bring barbells on tour in my suitcase. This contraption gives you handles to hold on to, which is better for my wrists, and as you push down, it rotates so you're exercising more muscles. Number 7, my Noble Carry-On. It's got a coffee cup holder that flips down. It's got an iPhone charger that you can plug into. On the top of the handle, it's got a little ledge that flips down to put your phone on so that you can just watch videos on YouTube. It's a sophisticated Swiss Army knife of travel suitcases. Number 8, therapeutic regimen. My supplements are a big deal. My Zoloft, my Nexium, my vitamin B12, and my vitamin D3. I have a condition known as Barrett's esophagus, where the lining of my esophagus has been eroded by acid that's come up from my stomach. It's something that I take very seriously because it's a precursor to esophageal cancer. So I take this antacid medication, and it's very important that I not eat for 45 minutes. 9, nut butter packets. After 45 minutes, I rip open a 2-ounce pack of nut butter. Then squeeze that all down. I rotate almond butter, cashew butter, and peanut butter. The fats in the nuts help absorb my vitamins. And number 10, headphones for time traveling. For the airplane, for cycling, or just walking around. When it comes to music, I strive to find something that I'm not familiar with and listen to it on a loop obsessively. I am effectively fusing the chapter of my life to that music, which will become a soundtrack of the moment that I'm experiencing. But I put my entire library on shuffle. It's like I'm bouncing around in a time machine. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Next article is about dancing. Choreographer finds value in every body. Pioneer Winter's works, including his Apollo, expand ideas about who gets to be a professional. By Margaret Fuhrer, photographs by Scott McIntyre. Photographs are of them dancing in the studio. The choreographer Pioneer Winter's Apollo begins with the curtain call. 3 men perform a luxuriant sequence of bows, their glittery white costumes complementing the gray and white in their hair. They are at home in the applause. Earlier in their careers, these artists, Clarence Brooks, 65, and Frank Camposano, 69, and Octavio Campos, 58, performed with some of the world's foremost dance groups. I am Apollo, each one declares into a microphone. Photos from the past, projected on a large screen, show them as young gods. After a few minutes, Winter, 38, enters an Apollo in training. As he dances with his elders, there are whispers of George Balanchine's ballet Apollo, in which 3 female muses instruct a cultish sun god. But while Winter's Apollo is in some ways a queer revision of Balanchine's, the guides in Winter's work aren't there just to assist. They are living archives, members of a dance generation devastated by AIDS. I have survived things that have killed most, Capisano says in Apollo monologue. 3 of the work's 4 cast members are HIV positive. And even as they look back, these veteran Apollos, all real life mentors to Winter, are still discovering themselves. I believe the potential isn't only tied to youth, Winter said in a video interview from Miami, where his company is based. Emergence can happen at any age. Professional dance tends to promote a narrow view of the dancing body, young, virtuosic, and a gymnastic way. One of the goals of the Pioneer Winter Collective, which will soon observe its 10th anniversary, is to invest in bodies that this definition excludes. Winter's works have featured senior dancers, disabled artists, drag queens, a transgender actor, a bodybuilder, a basketball player. Everybody is a dancing body, Winter said. Winter's collective is small. It has no full-time dancers, and its performance of Apollo this month at the American Dance Festival in Durham, North Carolina, was a rare appearance outside Florida. But the collective's expansive service-oriented mission makes it seem bigger than it is. In addition to performances, the collective has multi-development programs that offer financial support and mentorship to dance artists. Recovery in Motion, its movement workshop, is for people in addiction and recovery, has served hundreds of dancers and non-dancers. On stage, off stage, it's really just about filling the world with dance, Winter said, and then seeing the ripple effects that creates. Jody Nermenrichter, the executive director of the American Dance Festival, admires Winter's spirit of generosity. Instead of, I want to make work and have it seen, he's ready to really listen to what the community needs and then figure out how to best fit that, she said in a video interview. He is committed to embracing humanity. Winter grew up in Miami. Pioneer Winter is his given name, not a stage name. He was raised Jehovah's Witness, a religion that calls its full-time evangelists pioneers. Also, he said, my parents were hippies. Some of his first dance memories are standing on his mother's feet as she took tap classes, getting the rhythm into his body. He began training at the Edwin Holland School of Dance and later studied at the Miami City Ballet School and the North Carolina School of the Arts. But even as Winter began performing professionally while still in high school, he didn't envision a dance career. I think I hadn't yet experienced dance in a way that made me feel like I could do enough for the world if it was the only thing I was doing, he said. Academically gifted, he earned both an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's degree in public health and epidemiology from Florida International University by the time he was 21. He began working as a grant writer and project director at a clinic that offered HIV testing and counseling. Winter, who had come out as queer in his late teens, said he was shocked by how much stigma remained around HIV. That inspired him to choreograph his first work, Reaching the Surface, in 2010, featuring dancers with the virus or those affected by it. One performer tested positive during making of the piece. Winter had an epiphany. I realized art was not a directive thing, but a way to make sense of the chaos in the world, he said. When I created dance, I could rehearse the future that I wanted to be in. 10 years later, when Winter learned he was HIV positive, he revisited conversations he'd had with the work's cast, finding solace in their reflections. After Reaching the Surface, Winter began choreographing more frequently. He built a repertoire that now includes more than a dozen dances. The collective emerged organically, he said, as he connected with like-minded artists. Campos, a frequent collaborator, worked with Robert Wilson and Philip Glass early in his career. Now a community organizer, he met Winter in 2013, and the two soon became close. In an interview, Campos credited Winter with helping him emerge from drug and alcohol addiction several years ago. He has become like my son, but also he has supported me at times when I felt broken and insecure, Campbell said. He constantly and naturally invests in others. From the collective's earliest days, its work included community outreach, which Winter sees as directly connected to dance creation. Recovery in Motion, for example, grew out of a dance theater piece that was about addiction by Andrea LeBay, a participant in one of the collective's artist development programs. Struck by the positive response, many in the audience had been affected by addiction. Winter proposed a moment with a movement program for recovering addicts. The idea made immediate sense to Campos. I've seen how powerful dance can be as medicine, he said. If I hadn't had the ballet bar, not the bar where I drink, then I'd be dead now. Since 2024, Campos and LeBay have helped lead the workshop series, which returns to the Miami Theater Center in July. Campos said the Recovery in Motion format is partly based on 12-step meetings. Each session begins with a discussion of how participants are feeling, held in the familiar circle of chairs. Then it progresses to simple movement exercises and eventually the composition of short dances. The workshops have attracted a broad range of participants, including professional dancers, member of the Mikosuke tribe, and patients from local rehabilitation centers. It's this incredibly diverse group of people all working and laughing and crying together, Campbell said. And then you look at what they're making in the studio and you think, this is the best theater I've seen all year. Apollo, too, considers the beauty that can emerge from suffering. The work is more somber than Winter's original version, a cheeky play. I think we started off with the god Apollo in a leather bar and Hades, Winter said. The piece headed in a more ruminative autobiographical direction as Winter had extended conversations with his Apollos. Though the final dance includes moments of winking humor, it also references the dancers' experience with ageism and the scars they bear from the AIDS pandemic. I think people hear Apollo and think of an abstract ballet blanc like Balanchine's Apollo, Winter said, an austere, elegantly removed work danced in white costumes. But a ballet blanc tends to sublimate tension or sublimate conflicts. We face that conflict head on. We're a ballet blanc that gets real flushed. It is both an exciting and worrisome time for the collective. The American Dance Festival is its largest stage yet. The festival's director hopes the engagement will lead to more and bigger opportunities for Winter. I think he's just touched the tip of his potential, she said. But it is also a complex political moment to be making work that is, as Winter described it, queer, experimental, and fluid. Last year, the National Endowment for the Arts revoked the collective's grant for Apollo, part of a sweeping wave of award terminations under the Trump administration. Winter said losing the grant only spurred him on. Now I feel extra urgency, he said. At a time like now, there's an obligation almost to share this work as broadly as possible. Next article is about film. This director just won't play it safe. Behind Christopher Nolan's drive to make The Odyssey by Milena Ryzik. Christopher Nolan was in admitted state of anxiety. It's very nerve-wracking, the writer-director said, of the period before a film opens. You can work on something a long time. You care about it a lot. But movies belong to the audience, so it's kind of in the eye of the beholder. His tension was particularly acute a few weeks before the July 17th debut of The Odyssey, his latest high-stakes adaptation after Oppenheimer. His 2023 biopic won a slew of Oscars. It was a big undertaking, unquestionably, Nolan said of translating Homer's monumental poem for the screen. I don't think I would have felt ready to take on this film until now. The first commercial feature filmed completely in IMAX, The Odyssey is a 3-hour sword and sandals epic, the likes of which are hardly made anymore, shot in 6 countries with a cast and crew of thousands in practical effects in lieu of full CGI. It stars Nolan stalwarts like Matt Damon as Odysseus and Anne Hathaway as his wife Penelope, as well as new and sometimes unexpected players. Tom Holland as their son, John Leguizamo as blind swineherd, the rapper Travis Scott as Bard. IMAX screenings began selling out almost a year ago. I wanted to make a very accessible movie, Nolan said, but the challenges were immense, requiring new engineering and choreography. For Nolan and his cinematographer, Hoyt van Hoytema, IMAX invented a blimp system, Nolan said, to encase and maneuver its enormous and enormously loud camera. Castmates use mirrors to see each other around the equipment. Halfway through the shoot, Hoyt and I kind of looked at each other and realized, yep, this is going to work, Nolan said. In a recent interview in the Soho offices of his publicist, Nolan, who will turn 56 in July, side-eyed the color-coordinated bookshelves. His collection at home, he said, is a legitimate mess, driven especially by his college sweetheart wife, Emma Thomas, who is also his longtime producer and the mother of his 4 children. She reads 5 books to everyone that I read, and I wish that I could read that fast. Developing the Odyssey, he read more translations than I care to remember, he said, and realized it is your text. It's in everything I've done before. With a reputation as one of cinema's great purists, he doesn't even use a thesaurus. It doesn't help my writing. He might give off an intimidating aura, but in person he was genial, spending extra time to talk as he sipped tea from a refilled thermos. Punctuation to his thoughts. Here are edited excerpts from our conversation. You've been interested in making this film for a long time. What was your initial connection to the material? It's a story that always been in the back of my head, received in a lot of different ways. One of my first memories of receiving this story is being at primary school in London at probably 5 or 6 and seeing the older kids do a stage production. I remember the horse. I'm sure it was some cardboard concoction on a trolley, and the sirens particularly. It's not something I ever sat down and read. A lot of young people in this country seem very familiar with it, which is great, but a little daunting. How many versions of the script did you write? I tend not to write that many. Adapting a very academic history of Oppenheimer, beautifully written, but 700 pages, very dense. The approach to the Odyssey was sort of similar, in that I read it, then wrote a lot of notes from memory. I tend to think in geometric terms, mathematical terms. I do a lot of diagrams, a lot of scribbles and doodles for months and months before I let myself write. Then, I suppose ironically, for somebody who's associated with non-linear approaches, I write in a very intensely linear way. I start on page 1 and just go forward. If I looked at your desk, would it be littered with things? Yeah, it's like a beautiful mind, covered in paperwork and pin boards, timelines and looping arrows and shapes. There's a Venn diagram approach to point of view. I like to do that before I start writing because I find writing very difficult. When I'm actually writing the words, I'm trying to discover the characters through that. Were you a world builder as a kid? A lot of time I spent in my imagination, certainly. And I always loved that aspect of cinema. A movie would just take you somewhere completely different. George Lucas's first Star Wars as a kid, I think I saw it 12 times in the cinema. That for me was just the essence of this medium. Create an entire world that you can understand and live in that's absolutely different from everyday life. That's the great joy of movies. And that is the appeal of IMAX, right? My memories of cinema as a kid are of this so much larger than life screen. And for me as an adult, you're trying to get back there, trying to put the audience on the deck of the ship with Odysseus or be in the cave with the Cyclops. IMAX gives you that grand canvas. I love the format for that. Landscapes are amazing, but faces are just remarkable. I would mercilessly put Cillian Murphy, who played Oppenheimer, under the gaze of that camera, but there's something so rich and tactile and rewarding about seeing human faces shoot close up that way. Do other filmmakers ask you how to make IMAX technology work for them? Ryan Coogler called me before they committed to IMAX for Sinners. I think Dunkirk 2017 was the first time I dragged him to a screening of an original made film print on IMAX. I love to show filmmakers the potential of the format. So he called me when he was prepping, but really, I think he was sort of looking for someone to tell him it wasn't crazy to shoot his vampire film that way. I was like, no, I'd love to see that. One of the great satisfactions of my career has been being part of an evolutionary process of a filmmaking system. My excitement for having finished the film entirely in IMAX is what other filmmakers might want to do that. I just want to go see somebody else's film when they do it this way. What movies did you watch as an inspiration? Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev, 1966, made quite an impression on everybody. The textures are pretty remarkable. One of the films I screamed as a bit of a flyer, like I didn't really know whether it would be relevant, was Kurosawa's Ran in 1985. It's shot very differently, but there's this relationship between the environment and the wind. And now I look at our finished film, I think it was a huge influence. Were there images you had in your head before you started? Two that have carried me a long time. The horse about to be swept away in the tide, kind of listing over like the last thing you think anybody would be inside, or that it was intended to be pulled into the city. I don't tend to think of images for purely imagistic purposes, rather than doing the kind of horse on a roller skate that was all about wanting to present the horse in a way that an audience who is completely familiar with the story could see how it would work in a realistic sense. Also, I don't remember my original inspiration, the idea of a soldier decapitating a statue. That became very important narratively. You once described Oppenheimer as someone who knew how to motivate others through the theatricality of his persona. You could say the same for Odysseus. There seem to be a lot of parallels. When I finished the film, I was quite struck by that. Every film I do, I like to leave it with questions or unanswered themes that I might carry through to the next film. There's a lot of ideas of leadership, of mixed motivations, the flaws of people, the idea of where the best of intentions can go horribly wrong. Odysseus is a very complex character, a trickster, somebody who's smart and wily. In Star Wars terms, and Han Solo, but Han Solo is not the hero of Star Wars, it's Luke Skywalker. You also don't shy away from depicting the hubris, laughing. This is where you arrive at Oppenheimer. How would you characterize your own approach to risk? I'm very, very cautious. I see all things that will go wrong all the time. I'm one of those kinds of people. An outsider might look at your bodies of work and the ways you have innovated, and the same way that the character in the movie wants to be the first to experience something, even if it's brutally hard. I've seen your producers describe you as a risk-averse and responsible, and yet on screen you're making these enormous leaps. I think your question is probably more about creative risk. If you're really interested in movies and the history of movies, the one thing you see absolutely is that you have to take risks to succeed. The biggest risk of all is to play safe. That's what consistently in mainstream movies doesn't work. The audience is looking for something new. What I'm saying is I don't see it as risky. I remember a conversation with Emma when I first showed her the script for Memento, Nolan's breakout film in 2000. Structured backward and everything, she responded well with the script, but she felt like it was taking a lot of risk, a high burden, and I was able to say to her, no, I can do this. There are a lot of filmmakers who can do it in a more straightforward way. Actually, having something new to bring to the table mitigates the risk. It gives you a way to distinguish yourself. Then we tried to sell it to people who didn't get it, so she was completely right. But eventually it got to an audience, and the audience appreciated that. The risk is the intermediaries, the financiers, the studio. If you can get to the audience, I mean, I'm not making any predictions for this movie, but in the past, we've been well rewarded for having faith in the audience. Watching the movie, I thought a lot about the classical origins of hospitality, or Zeus's law, in the story, and how it functions in our current divided era. The greatness of the poem is such that you approach these things as if they're foreign and ancient. Then as you explore them, they suddenly become stunningly relevant. Zeus's law, it's the golden rule. Treat as you would be treated, and with the theological underpinning in their world, that you might be a god in disguise. For that world, it's very clearly basic survival. You leave the house for more than a couple days. You are, by definition, throwing yourself at the mercy of strangers. It's the only way society can function. That became very important to the film, and as soon as you start drilling down on it, you realize nothing's changed. That's everything in terms of holding civilization together and even defining civilization. Is there a moral lesson that you wanted people to see, especially in presenting it as a big commercial movie? Absolutely, 100%, but I don't want to articulate it. I want people to experience it in the film. I have strong feelings about how the story moves me in ethical terms. I'm hoping that people have that feeling the way I did. Is that a reason that you were so attracted to it at that point? I think so, but I didn't know that going in, as a filmmaker, you have to move in impulsive ways. I was looking to challenge myself with a completely different type of storytelling, and I was looking for a gap in the culture. I'm looking at Greek mythology. The Odyssey itself, why hasn't it become part of a modern cinema? That's very exciting as a filmmaker. And as you drill down, what is there to get your teeth into? The Odyssey, as with Oppenheimer, the reason these are great stories is they have these resonances, those knotty problems, ethical dilemmas. It's about impossible situations. That's what makes it a terrific story. When you're in production or something, do you dream about it? I tend to dream about the process more, which is horrible. These terrible anxiety dreams about, the day's almost over, we haven't gotten a single shot. They're not very useful dreams. When I'm writing, I tend to dream about the story itself more. It's kind of startling to me that of all filmmakers, you are still waking up in a cold sweat. Well, it's part of seeing all the things that can go wrong. But one of the functions of dreams is that they're anticipatory. It's warning you about something your subconscious is telling you. Quite often, if I can't sleep before a shoot, I have a lot of bad Sunday nights. It's because I haven't worked out this week's work properly. You stay awake all night processing things that maybe you didn't have time to process the week before. So I see the utility of it increasingly, and I'm calm about the tension, if that makes sense. You have historically not been a smartphone user. Do you think of yourself as a technophobe? No. I think of myself as a techno-skeptic. The reason I still shoot on film is because it's better in terms of representing the way the eye sees the world than any digital imaging system I've seen, and I've looked at all of them very carefully. Analog color is different to digital color. So for me, what's important is that you have the choice, but I've always edited my films digitally. We absolutely use computer graphics as part of our visual effects pipeline. I embrace new technology all the time, but it tends to be sold to people at the expense of systems that might still be valid and viable. That's why I saw in my industry, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, we almost lost the film. You are listening to a reading of articles and features From the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Article about television, partying like a blood-sucking rock star. Sam Reed of the horror series The Vampire Lestat can draw a big crowd off the screen too, by Eric Piepenburg. Almost 2,500 people packed the Beacon Theater on Manhattan's Upper West Side earlier this month to hear a French vampire sing songs with titles like Brutal Love and Butterscotch Bitch. The bloodsucker at the mic and a sparkly black tank top was the Australian actor Sam Reed, performing as Lestat de Lioncourt. The character is the pretty boy namesake of the vampire Lestat. The darkly comic horror series originally called Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. The new season, the show's third, is now airing on AMC and AMC+. 2 days after the concert, over coffee at Upper West Side Hotel, Reed, 39, came across as the soft-spoken opposite of his swaggering stage persona. He talked quietly about how thrilling it was to give the kind of louche performance he could hardly have imagined as a boy growing up on a cattle farm in rural New South Wales, Australia. He also sounded spent by the demands of a press tour and by how fame has changed his life since Interview with the Vampire premiered in 2022. Gone are the days when he and his co-star Jacob Anderson, who plays his vampire lover Louis de Pointe-du-Lac, could walk down a Manhattan street unnoticed. Now you have to apologize because you physically can't get to every person, Reed said. As this show reaches more of an audience and becomes more swept up in its own chaos, we lose more of those quieter times outside of it. Like the Los Pollos Hermanos restaurant pops up that had Breaking Bad fans in a frenzy, Reed's concert was marketing gold for AMC. It was a reality meets fantasy introduction to the latest season of the longest-running series in the Immortal universe, the network's name for its franchise of Rice adaptations, which include The Mayfair Witches and the canceled Talamasca The Secret Order. Considering the extent to which The Vampire Lestat has pivoted from its first 2 seasons as Interview with the Vampire, the buzzy concert was a kind of rebranding launch event. AMC has also released several original songs from the new season and a cover of Billy Idol's 1981 hit Dancing with Myself, all sung by Reed. The show's original incarnation, based on the 1976 first novel in Rice's Vampire Chronicles series, focused considerably on Louis, on his rocky romance with Lestat, on his relationship with the vampire Armand Assad Zaman, and on his interviews with the journalist Danielle Malloy, Eric Bogosian. The Vampire Lestat, named for the second Vampire Chronicles novel and set in modern-day America, centers the title Immortal, played by Reed, as a still savagely bloodthirsty rocker for the commanding stage presence of Lust for Life era Iggy Pop, the creamy baritone of David Sylvian, and the crippling self-doubt of Kurt Cobain. Louis is back this season, and so is Malloy, whom Lestat hires to make a documentary about Lestat's 3-century life. Lives really, like the novel, the show jumps between Lestat's North American concert tour and flashbacks to his upbringing in the 18th century France. This isn't Reed's first stint as a professional singer. In 2017, he appeared on London's West End in a production of Girl from the North Country, a musical built around Bob Dylan songs. But the ballads and bangers in The Vampire Lestat, written by the composer Daniel Hart, are neither Dylan nor show tune in nature. Reed said he took on a rigorous regimen of vocal conditioning to fit Lestat's songs into the scream territory of his range. To finesse the kind of stage presence he wanted, he studied videos of David Bowie peacocking as Ziggy Stardust. Going into the season, Reed was confident that Lestans and Lesluts, as fans of the series call themselves, would appreciate the new belter Lestat. Reed definitely did. He grew up with the passion for singing and was eager to do more of it in an acting context. Initially, however, he was less sure about the series' big swerve. It's very scary when you're getting this material coming in, he said, thinking, oh my God, I don't know if we're going to lose our entire audience. Roland Jones, the showrunner, likened the progression and name change for season 3 to those of another popular saga. It was called Star Wars, and then it was called The Empire Strikes Back, he said. Nobody's going to be fumbling around like, what's this new show? AMC hasn't announced a 4th season, but Jones said it's trending that way. AMC's Lestat comprises the whole source novel. The next novel in Vice's series is The Queen of the Damned. Jones said he knew the 3rd season might not be everybody's bag, calling the overhaul a little wily, a little woolly, and a little contradictory. Critics have been mostly positive so far, praising the show's musical maximalism with descriptions like brilliantly chaotic and gloriously glam. But Jones had zero doubts about Reed's rock star turn, calling it an iconic American performance that ranks with those of actors who disappeared into earlier roles like James Gandolfini and The Sopranos and Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad. While I see a lot of times are boring, cowardly performances and people who could do more but are in fear of looking weird, Jones said. On this show, especially in Sam, everything is go for it or go for it and fail. There will not be a performance like this year on television, he added. He's won it, it's done. Reed grew up in spending time alone on his father's cattle farm, where he was drawn to dark entertainments. He made his own stage blood, and the psychology of monsters he read right along with Edgar Allan Poe and Mary Shelley. After graduating from London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, he started making films and television, including playing John Glenn in 2015 ABC series The Astronaut Wives Club. His fame grew in Australia after roles as a priest in the 2019 TV miniseries Lambs of God, and an ambitious producer in the early 2020s journalism drama The Newsreader, which is streaming on AMC+. Reed is dating his newsreader castmate Philippa Northeast. Reed has lately been back in Australia and back in a priest collar, rehearsing a new production of the Pulitzer-winning play Doubt, a Parable by John Patrick Shanley. Reed stars as Father Flynn, a no-nonsense Bronx clergyman who clashes with a nun who suspects him of improper relations with a young boy. The show will run Tuesday to August 2nd at the Sydney Theatre Company. He said he was eager to get back on stage after spending 10 years doing film and television solely. What you don't get out of that is a beginning to an end arc, he said. In theater, we build it and build it and build it, and we get to live in it. That's what I like to do. Mitchell Butel, the theater company's artistic director, said Reed's outward shyness belies the swagger underneath. You see Sam perform, and there's this sense of mystery, plus this incredible sensitivity and confidence and gravitas, he said. While Reed's 2 current characters, vampire and priest, sit on opposite ends of the spiritual spectrum, each confronts profound moral questions about everlastingness and regret in the vampire Lestat, and about faith and conviction and doubt. The actor has spent plenty of time pondering both the boredom of living forever and the repression of withholding all of the experiences of life for the potential promise of an afterlife that nobody's been able to prove, he said. So maybe it's no surprise that he seemed happiest talking about a less existential kind of messiness, the main Mrs. Dirt. I spent a lot of time out in the country when I was a kid and continue to do that and really find that to be the best experience, he said. When I'm not working, it's just about going back there and helping Dad on the farm. Being able to see things physically grow, he added. It's just so much more gratifying than always pursuing this career. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Next article, there's a paucity of new musicals on Broadway. Economics, creative changes, and booked spaces are factors by Michael Paulson. Coming out of the pandemic, Broadway was awash in new musicals. 14 opened during the 2024-2025 season and 15 the season before that. But almost all of them were flops, and the industry took note. This past season, only 6 new musicals opened, two of which, The Queen of Versailles and Beaches, quickly imploded. The anemic stretch seems likely to continue. Just 2 new musicals have announced Broadway runs before the end of the year. Wanted, about a pair of outlaw sisters, and Galileo, about the astronomer accused of heresy. It didn't have to be this way. Circling Broadway, hoping for a place to land, are musicals featuring the songbooks of Prince and Dolly Parton, musicals about murder and mythology, and urinary incontinence, and musicals encouraged by runoffs of Broadway at regional theaters or in London. So what happened? How did the new musical, Long Broadway's fundamental building block, become so scarce that the New York Drama Critics Circle opted to forego an award this year for Best Musical, and 2 of the 5 Tony nominations for Best Score went to music composed for plays? Opening any show on Broadway requires 3 basic elements: art, a script, and, for musicals, a score that are both more or less ready to go. Money, mounting a play or musical costs millions of dollars, and real estate. Broadway has 41 theaters, and they are operated by a small group of landlords who function as gatekeepers. The number of shows that satisfy all 3 of those requirements are dwindling. It's not as if Broadway has ever been an easy place to crack, but the usual mismatch between expenses and income has never been greater, said John Breglio, a longtime entertainment lawyer and sometime producer. Some producers theorize that this skimpy period is essentially a fluke, that the high-volume stretches from 2023 to 2025 are the result of pandemic backlog, and the recent dip reflects of a natural rebalancing. Others point to signs that next year the pace of openings could pick up. Both Warriors, Lin-Manuel Miranda's first full-fledged post-Hamilton stage show, written by Issa Davis, and Paddington the Musical, a big brand, big budget show that has been a hit in London, are planning Broadway openings for next April. And further down the line, several dozen musicals are in development, from well-known titles like The Greatest Showman, La La Land, and The Princess Bride, to a wide variety of smaller scale shows. This is an optimistic industry, said Eric Puchich, the head of Broadway banking at City National Bank. Nothing makes sense on Broadway, none of it pencils out. But despite that, we still see bank accounts being opened for shows that could be 6 months down the line or 5 years down the line, which shows there is a pipeline of shows being developed. Optimistic or not, systemic challenges are reshaping the path for new musicals from page to stage. Here's what's happening. Bumpy roads lead to detours. Dolly, a true original musical about the life of Dolly Parton, and Purple Rain, an adaptation of Prince's 1984 rock romance film, had considered opening on Broadway this past season. But both hit unexpected turbulence during pre-Broadway runs in the musicians' home states. So in each case, the producers took a step that happens too rarely in musical theater. They slowed down to make changes. Purple Rain, with an eye-popping initial budget of $29.5 million, according to Securities and Exchange Commission filing, had a run last fall at the State Theater in Minneapolis, and the early reviews were not encouraging. Since then, the production has been overwhelming and overhauling the script and the creative team. The show now has a new director, Saheem Ali, who directed Buena Vista Social Club and Fat Ham on Broadway, and succeeds Liliana Blaine Cruz, and a new book writer, Peter Dukin, who wrote the book for Dogfight, and succeeds Brandon Jacobs Jenkins. The revised show is planning to open on Broadway next spring. Dolly, which ran last summer at the Fisher Center for the Performing Arts in Nashville, received supportive reviews from the local critics, but industry insiders, including the show's own team, thought it needed retooling. And I am spending a lot of time writing and reworking, Parton said in May on Instagram, adding that it's going to be opening later in New York this fall or early winter. It appears that she was too optimistic. The show is now hoping for a 2027 opening. Some smaller shows also opted to take time to revise, including Revolutions, a musical about resistance featuring songs by Tom Morello, an alumni of Rage Against the Machine. A well-received run last year at the Goodman Theater in Chicago led to talk of a quick transfer to Broadway, but the show's backers held off. The piece is phenomenal, but unfortunately it will remain relevant for a bit longer. But there was some work we wanted to do, said Leah Volok, a lead producer. We're still figuring out if there is an additional step before the commercial buzz. seesaw of Broadway. Waiting for a theater, real estate is a perennial limiting factor on Broadway. About a quarter of the theaters are occupied by long-running shows that opened before the pandemic. Turnover happens at unpredictable times, and not every theater works for every production. The buildings vary considerably in capacity from 600 to 1,900 seats, and producers must decide if available house will serve their show artistically and financially. Going into the wrong theater can expedite the death of a show, said Hal Luftig, a lead producer of Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which had a well-received run in 2024 at the Goodman. A plan to open on Broadway in 2025 was foiled by the lack of an available and appropriate theater. Now Luftig aims to open next year. Hopefully in the fall, we'll pull together another reading, introduce it to theater owners, and then it's all about the real estate, he said. Other shows are also waiting, particularly for the mid-sized theaters that are often in short supply. It's frustrating because I have a really wonderful, well-received, popular musical that is ready for prime time, and it's been very difficult to get to the right house. And keeping a team together is challenging, said Tom Curtahay, a lead producer, the Bedwetter Sarah Silverman musical that has had productions at Atlantic Theater Company in New York and Arena Stage in Washington, and has been waiting for a year for theater. But I trust that we will get there. For some shows, the waiting list does work. Wanted, about Black sisters who pass as white and become outlaws, will open in November at the James Earl Jones Theater, later than first hoped, but the delay got the show a very long runway, which is more valuable, said Ben Holtzman, one that shows leads producers because it takes a lot of time to build a marketing campaign, to raise money, and to build a fan base. Pivoting off Broadway, some artistically promising but commercially challenging shows, at least as interim step, have opted for productions at off-Broadway nonprofits where they can fine-tune their material, build word of mouth, and test in New York waters with lower financial risks. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 28th, 2026 issue of the New York Times Arts and Leisure section. We read from the New York Times Arts and Leisure section every Sunday at 3 p.m. Your reader has been Erin, and thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the re-airing of this morning's Buffalo News. Following that at 6 p.m. is the Buffalo News Viewpoints. Stay tuned for this reading and more throughout the day. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability